Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the Intelligence and National Security Alliance, Mr. Joseph DeTrani.
Thank you all for being here this afternoon. It's a great honor right now to introduce someone who is such a great patriot and making such a big difference to our nation's defense. It's my honor to introduce for the final plenary speaker, the 18th Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Mike Flynn.
That's enough. That's probably good.
No, that's not enough. His bio's in the program, but I'd like to highlight a few things. Mike spent 3 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, developing and perfecting intelligence-driven operations as the J2 for JSOC. He went on to be the J2 CENTCOM, J2 Joint Staff, J2 in Afghanistan for General McChrystal and Petraeus, and now the Director of the DIA. Some pretty tough jobs in service to his country. In his address today, Lieutenant General Flynn will address the challenges and priorities for the intelligence community from a defense perspective. Afterwards, Director Flynn will take questions and answers from the audience and answer the questions from the audience. And please pass your questions. We'll have some cards going around. We have some interns who'll keep INSA going, passing these cards around, and then we will, looking at the time, we'll take the questions. So it's a great honor to introduce Lieutenant General Flynn. Thank you, sir.
Great. So close the doors because I know it's late in the day, and I am going to drone on a bit here. So I want to make sure that nobody leaves. So you're going to have to withstand the pain as I'm standing up here withstanding the pain. Wow. I know you've had a great day. I have some prepared remarks here that I'm going to go through. I just want to say thanks to Ambassador DeTrani. You know, just talking outside. When I was the Joint Staff J2, we were doing a Korean problem like we do frequently, and Joe was leading the intelligence community effort and issue at that particular time, and it was really, really, one, it was extraordinary leadership, but two, it was another reflection of how far our intelligence community has come in terms of bringing together a community to really solve some of the tough problems that we have and not worrying about whether this agency has something or that agency has something. So thank you very much, and I really always thank the introductions. You want to keep those short because they become obituaries after a while. Now, I also want to thank Chuck Alsop. Chuck and I have been friends for a long time, and just really the gracious, I don't know where Chuck is at, but gracious invitation by Chuck for allowing me to speak here today, and I hope I provide some value. And I also want to congratulate the extraordinary team at INSA for consistently bringing together these important events and leading our nation's most important conversations, and it's really an honor to be asked to speak here today, and I know I'm closing out the day. You've had a full day of discussion on issues ranging from the evolving insider threat to cyber as an intelligence discipline, to the IC's relationship with local and state level governments, all the way to updating the ever-challenging security clearance process. You've heard from Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Ruppersberger about the Hill perspective on the state of our national defense and the role of the intelligence community. And you've had the opportunity to ask D&I Clapper about the impressive advances we've made in intelligence information sharing, integration, and shared information technology. It's been a very full and interesting day, and following that group is definitely a tough act. So I'm going to do my best to keep it as engaging as possible during this last session of the day. And as the ambassador said, I'll stick around as long as I can to take some questions. There's been one major national security issue on the top of everyone's mind for the past few weeks, and that's Syria. Right now, we, the United States, and the national security enterprise are facing major and difficult crossroads when it comes to the crisis in Syria. And there, quite frankly, is no easy path to choose. Just as we are winding down from more than a decade of military engagements in Central Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Libya, we are in a situation where we must contemplate intervention in a complicated crisis that has been festering for more than 2 years now. The facts are clear. A loose but fairly trained federation of roughly 1,200 rebel groups have been continuously fighting to take down the Assad regime since 2011. While the majority of the rebel groups are moderate, several radical Islamist factions have surfaced, like the al-Qaeda-aligned al-Nusra Front. And these Islamists tend to be better led, better organized, better armed, and better trained than the other groups. These are the types of separatists that would encourage renewed regional instability should they gain traction in a fractured population. Over the past 2 years, the Assad regime has, in many cases, savagely responded to rebel actions since they first began as demonstrations and protests. And the two sides have traded the upper hand throughout the conflict. By recent confirmed accounts, the regime has used chemical weapons on more than one occasion to gas thousands of his people in his desire to retain power at any cost. Additionally, over the last year, both the United States and the international community have stated that the use of these chemical weapons cannot go unpunished. So now, with confirmed sarin gas attacks, we are at a crossroads where we must choose between intervention and detachment, between striking the Assad regime in retribution for their widely condemned use of chemical weapons and upholding our stated commitment to human rights on the one hand, and keeping our interests, not to mention financial resources, disentangled from another extremely complicated Middle Eastern crisis. It's sort of a damned if we do and a damned if we don't situation. Definitely a dilemma. Deciding between intervention and detachment in Syria is an extremely difficult choice, made even harder as details of Assad's atrocities against his own people continue to pour in, and Russia enters the conversation with an encouraging but questionable alternative. I do not envy the policymakers who must make the ultimate decision. Their predicament reminds me of the old Yogi Berra quote, "If you come to a fork in the road, take it. If it were only that easy this time, Yogi." And remember, I'm a Red Sox fan. In my judgment, as a senior member of the intelligence community and as a national security leader, what is really fascinating about this crossroads and other issues just like it that suddenly force us to consider our role and responsibility in the international arena is that they're simply not that rare anymore. In the past, these major challenges would pop up once or twice during a presidential administration, maybe. Today, the United States seems to confront a new major national security issue on a frequent and seemingly endless basis, which begs the question, is crisis our new normal? Whether it's determining our support to the Allied campaign in Libya, debating our relationship with Egypt after continuing shifts in power, or deciding our role in Afghanistan after U.S. troop withdrawal, we are constantly facing a wide and broad range of major security decisions, the dynamics of which are constantly shifting, and the effects of which will be felt for years and decades to come. I am not the first nor the last to point out the unprecedented range of threats facing the United States, but the overlooked lesson from the advent of the Syria crisis on U.S. consciousness is just how quickly an issue can become a front page, above the fold U.S. national security priority today, moving quickly from the back pages of current events. This crisis perfectly demonstrates how rapidly a challenge from the endless list of threats can bubble up to the surface and completely change our nation's course and commitment of resources. What this staggering rate of change in this highly unpredictable security environment loudly and clearly says to me is that intelligence is a major, if not the most, critical enabler and guarantor of our national security. It's out there on the front pages every day. Intelligence is the only weapon in our arsenal that has the responsibility and the capability of anticipating and understanding the precursors of instability and political, social, and economic unrest around the world. It's the single most powerful capability we have to influence the best course of action, or at a minimum, the least damaging way forward in these difficult situations that we face. We are an extremely valuable asset to the national security enterprise, and one whose demand signal is skyrocketing, while available resources for the foreseeable future will only be further constrained. I want to underscore the word value very specifically here, especially as we continue to assess our mission and our worth through the lens of our country's present fiscal strains and sequestration. Getting America's fiscal house in order is and should be a major priority for the United States government, And I think I speak for all of my colleagues in the intelligence community when I say that we are committed to being vigilant and responsible stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. Right now, though, we are strongly concentrating on maintaining the valuable and irreplaceable asset of intelligence and making sure that we are managing sequestration so that we can maintain the strength and the success of the community, absorb risk where we can, and invest for our future. The right training, the right regions, the right issues where the next crossroads is likely to pop up. Investing with an eye firmly fixed on the future is key, because if we think that the environment is difficult now, I guarantee you it is not going to get any easier in the decades ahead, and that's a promise. I know earlier today there was a global trends breakout session, so I won't rehash the same discussion. But projected demographic, migratory, technological, and economic changes that we foresee over the next 50 years will undoubtedly tax our future national security enterprise. For instance, aging first world populations, widening gender gaps in developing countries, and a growing pocket of young, underemployed males in the third world and largely economically struggling regions will change the military face of many of our allies and our enemies. Regional disputes over critical natural resources that are quickly dwindling in supply, especially water, energy, and rare earth elements and minerals, will threaten already tenuous political and social balances. We see this today. Immediately, the delicate balance between nuclear Pakistan and India comes to mind. Also, the rapid advancement in technology for destructive or disruptive purposes that will challenge us to not only keep up with the pace of change, but stay one step ahead and secure our systems that increasingly rely on technology to exist. The expectations for technological advancement brings me to the one issue that I can see bubbling up on the horizon right now, and that issue is responding to the tactical use of cyber attacks for strategic purposes. Now, we are all aware of the cyber threat. You spent a significant part of the afternoon talking about its various forms, from rogue hackers to insider threats to state-sponsored actors, and in May, appropriately, at Pearl Harbor, Secretary Hagel said in no uncertain terms that the devastatingly destructive potential of cyber attacks has become the national security challenge of our age. We are also fully aware of our vulnerabilities. We understand that our nation's infrastructure remains largely unprotected, that U.S. private companies do not have the resources or the imperative to guard against increasingly sophisticated cyber encroachment. We understand that almost everything in our society has a cyber element in it, from the cell phones that we carry, a pacemaker in someone's chest, the computers that we use every day, the elevators that we ride, all the way to the targeting software our military uses to precision guide our missiles to their targets. It's a scary reality, and we are all aware of the danger as information technology marches on in exponential advancement. Information technology is one of our most important military enablers. It provides us with unparalleled precision and battle space awareness that allows our military forces the flexibility to act across the operational spectrum. While we grow ever more worried about the threats to infrastructure in our increasingly wired society, DIA is increasingly focused on the threats that can degrade our military capabilities. Militarized cyber weapons are a new world for us, one where we need to understand doctrine and intent of our cyber foes in order to best manage the risk that they will pose against us. DIA has been the all-source leader on enemy doctrine and discipline, order of battle research, and offensive capabilities for more than 50 years, and is working hard with our IC partners to understand the security challenges that we face in our era, in our age. So what do these many major national security challenges mean for the IC? What do tomorrow's trends mean for our defense? From my viewpoint, and in light of the shifting, dangerous environment where Syria can become a top priority and the ever-present danger of a cyber attack simmers in the background, in light of the mandate to get our fiscal house in order, in light of the various future trends that will continue to complicate matters, and in light of the absolutely critical role of intelligence for our national security, we must do the following. We must adjust our operating model to refocus on our mission and our unique strengths. We must continually emphasize burden sharing, partnerships, and integration, and we must instill flexibility and agility to respond to crises. That is our new normal. All of this has to be woven into the fabric and culture, especially culture, of who we are and of everything that we do. At DIA, we have already laid the groundwork for that future. We have reorganized into a centers-based model that networks and integrates talent from across the agency, whether that talent resides in an analyst, a collector, collection manager, a technician, a technical expert, or a targeteer. And it brings them together as one team to solve the critical problems that we face. That is a critical personal lesson that I learned from the past decade of war. At the core of these centers are three qualities. First, a tight fusion between analysis and collection, which we know based on our experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere is the most successful model for timely and responsive intelligence production and support. Second is flexibility, as the team members no longer have to contend with an organizational boundary that keeps them apart from the mission that they're trying to accomplish. And lastly, integration, as each of these centers has several interagency embeds from across the IC, as well as a very tight relationship with our combatant commands and our service intelligence centers. This is really, really an important issue. It's sort of a blinding flash to the obvious, but it's one of those things where that's not the model that we had coming into the last decade of war. We had separate systems, and I know, seeing some of Director Clapper's remarks, I think he may have talked a little bit about that, but I'll be more than happy to answer any questions on that. Right now, our Middle East Africa Regional Center, in close coordination with CENTCOM, the Joint Staff, OSD, the ODNI, and the White House, is handling our assessments of the Syria crisis. And I have the utmost faith that they have the right talent, the right tools, and the right resources to get the job done. We have also pushed more of our intelligence professionals, both collectors and analysts, into the field in order to thicken the edges, ensuring that they and the agency as a whole have an appreciation and working understanding of developments across the globe. My constant drumbeat is to make the edge the center. And I'll say that again, my constant drumbeat is to make the edge the center. The unique perspective of these officers in the field have often made the crucial difference in our support to policymakers during the AQ threats in Yemen, operations in Mali, instability in Egypt, and certainly growing unrest in Syria. In fact, just this last week, feedback from one of our intelligence officers in a particular country went directly to the Secretary of Defense in advance of his talks to allies about instability in the Middle East. So it's definitely providing the right knowledge at the right time to influence and support decision-making. As the U.S. finds itself with new national security crossroads to navigate, DIA is focused on being in the right place at the right time. We are also leveraging technology, where appropriate, to give us a competitive edge against our enemies. I know DNI Clapper has already talked to you a bit about ISIT, and you had a breakout session on the topic earlier, so I'll try not to be repetitive. But I simply want to underscore how groundbreaking the project is for the intelligence community, that this initiative is for the intelligence community. You have to pay attention to it. If you're not a technician or a technologist, get to be that way, because this is part of our future. This integrated IT concept, connecting everyone in the community under a common IT umbrella, is breaking down both cultural, and that's probably the most important part of this thing, but also technological barriers between agencies. This is securely allowing the community's professionals to share and customize the latest web tools and applications, a truly revolutionary concept for the IC, and one that we've sorely needed for our uncertain future. I sincerely believe that ISIT is the single most important project underway in the IC. And I'll go one step further and say that ISIT will be a key pillar that supports the community's continued success and, frankly, its relevance to decision makers in the future. Together with the DNI and NGA, I'm proud to say that DIA has led an ISIT launch team, essentially milestone number 1, that just recently achieved that milestone, giving access to the groundbreaking new system to thousands of community analysts, and I expect great things. And we're already into the first month of it. I got an update today, and it's really groundbreaking stuff. It is the users deciding how to use and what the systems are going to be, and not really the IT or the technicians of the world. We need them to be able to engineer our way to the right methods, but it's actually the people that are using it. They're the ones that are really in the design piece of this thing. And again, I would offer up to anybody about any questions that you may want to ask. So really, in conclusion for today, and to kind of come to a close here on this, I want to highlight that in all of these efforts at DIA, my main focus has been really to ruthlessly deconflict and prioritize efficiency while emphasizing sound business practices at all levels. And that's been my message to our business partners out there, because it's really important that we work this together. I mean, if you haven't studied history, George Washington had contractors. So we have to figure out how to work together in an environment that is challenging us. My overarching big purpose at the end of the day is, through better intelligence support, we will make our operational forces more effective. So if I'm efficient at what I do, we can make the people that are actually having to accomplish their mission far more effective by giving them the right kinds of tools. Right now, we are conducting DIA's first ever full audit of the agency's capabilities, and I have launched a special task force that is laser focused on examining and analyzing DIA's reliance on contracting to make sure that we are spending our money, our collective money, as wisely as possible. I take the mandate to cut waste very seriously, and I also want to make sure that we are putting our money in the right places where our attention will have to be focused on the various crossroads that we will come upon, and ultimately those strategic turns that we will have to negotiate in the future. I want to ensure that we are prepared for the next Syria and the one after that. So Joe, Ambassador Detrani, Chuck, again for the invitation. Thank you very much for listening to me, folks, and I hope I provide a little bit of value today. Thanks.
General, I have a microphone for you. So let me say, General Flynn, that was an outstanding presentation. Thank you very much. Let me just open it up. We'll have some questions, and thank you for agreeing to take the questions. You cited a number of issues, intelligence challenges, which are daunting, to say the least. You spoke about a reorganization at DIA, the question of bringing collection and analysis together, integration, flexibility, and with that reorganization, and also the establishment of the Defense Clandestine Service, and the mission at DIA being to prevent strategic surprise. How well is DIA doing on these fronts?
Yeah, let me just, a little bit of historical context for people that have been in the community a while, and of course you had, Director Clapper in here, and he's just an incredible human being. I'm doing a personal study right now of DIA between the time frame of 92 to 95, and DIA between the time frame of 2011 and 2015. And I really, and I also have looked at not only my experiences in the war theaters the last decade, but also watching where our community is going in the future. In large organizations, and so for anybody that's leading, or certainly at a senior level in a large organization, probably the most difficult thing is breaking through the cultural barrier. The first thing to do is to really understand what it is that you do. What's your special sauce? What is it that you provide? So when I looked at, as I'm studying this historic example to kind of make sure that I gauge where this organization is at today and where it will need to be, maybe 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, another 20 years down the road. DIA was roughly right at about 6,000, a little bit less than 6,000 people in the early 90s. And Jim Clapper broke it into 3 centers. One center was analysis, one center was collection, and one center was support. So today, we're about 4 times that size. And it is what it is. It's grown. We are in about twice, actually 2/3 more countries of the world today. And we're involved still in combat operations as well as what I would call conflict, certainly stability kinds of operations, doing intelligence things. And so what we have to do is we have to come to grips with that. Come to grips with that growth, come to grips with the operational environment, come to grips with the fiscal environment. And if you look back in that era in the 90s, for those that remember that, it was coming out of the Cold War, the results of a Desert Shield, Desert Storm. This one is coming out of a decade plus that we're still in, and now facing up to the reality of sequestration, which I know Director Clapper talked about. So I'm attacking the culture, and I'm attacking the design. And the whole purpose is to integrate, as Director Clapper says in his vision statement, which I think I've stolen, and I think is because it's so enduring, is we will be a nation made more secure by becoming a fully integrated intelligence community. So the key word there is integrated. And it's sort of a blinding flash of the obvious, but it is not a natural act. I mean, it is just not. And because people want to own stuff, they want to control things. And now we have enormous potential using our technology, and I think that's why I'm such a fan of the eyesight. We have to use our technology to be global, to provide global leadership, and to integrate and virtually collaborate, because we can't have everybody physically co-located. You can't own everything. And we have to come to grips with that. That's really the evolution of where DIA is at today, but you know, I think as Clapper talks about, you know, integration is a journey. This is a journey. This design is a journey. I know future directors are going to look at it. I mean, my intent, I have every intent to do this, and I'm you know, either hate it or there's you know, effigies out there, but this is to, you know, I don't even like this word, but I learned it a couple of years ago from Rick Zahner. You know, I want to instantiate this idea about integration and make it so it is so hard to reverse it. And so that's kind of where I'm at. That's a personal mission of mine, and it's to make sure that this is not about DIA. This is about the security, the national security of our country. I have a responsibility to ensure that this organization fits into that model.
How is it going, General Flynn? Is that moving
yeah,
forward?
it's going fine. It's, you know, I mean, it's, how many people in here from DIA, you know? Yeah, so you know, hopefully, you know, everybody tells me it's going fine. I'll just leave it at that. You know, yes, sir, it's going great. You know, I mean, when I was a lieutenant, Joe, and you taught, there's a, what's more important? You get asked this question when you're a young person in the military. What's more important, the mission or the people? You know, or the human? What's more important? Well, the answer is the mission. The mission is more important. And now, that doesn't mean you don't take care of your people. I mean, we have to really take good care of our people. If they love their mission, they love what they do, and they'll do whatever you ask them to do. So,
Thank you, General. General Flynn, you mentioned Syria a minute ago, and the recent developments with Syria, with the Russian proposal, and the possibility of a diplomatic negotiated settlement with respect to chemical weapons. The predicate being here that that those chemical weapons are given up, they're eventually destroyed, and so forth. What is DIA's role in this process, and how do you see the verification process moving forward?
yeah. So our role has been intense. It's been continuous. It has been, you know, from the beginning. The experience that DIA employees and DIA intelligence officers have, particularly those that served in Iraq, we have, in our agency, we have over 6,000 civilians who have served in a combat environment in the last decade. So that's pretty extraordinary. So those that served in Iraq and really focused on the Al-Qaeda crowd, particularly the Al-Qaeda crowd, but certainly focused on the Middle East militaries and the kinds of capabilities and things that they had, they're just, you know, worth their weight in gold right now. So we are deeply involved, but we're involved as a member of the community. We're involved as an integrated team, supporting Central Command, European Command, Africa Command, you know, certainly Cyber Command. And we're also supporting, you know, the military planning that's going on at every level, up to and including the Joint Staff. In terms of the policy side, we are deeply involved in that. We have provided what I would call the nation's experts on chemical warfare to the State Department, and they are today helping Secretary Kerry negotiate that issue. And they were called on a dime, and the individual that I'm thinking about in this case was absolutely, are you kidding me? And he jumped right into it. So it's intimate, and I think that's not a word that you'll hear a lot from me, but it's an intimate relationship with the various customers that we have. And that's really, really important, because that's what they want. They want to believe in what you provide, and they do today.
Sir, before I get to the questions here, I'll follow up on that one. Probably not a fair question. How confident are you that we'll be successful in getting all those weapons out and destroying those chemical weapons in Syria?
Boy, I think first, I don't have, a level of confidence, honestly, that to get through this first iteration. I mean, I think it's a, as I stated in my remarks, it's an interesting, sort of foray that we are finding our way through right now, and I think that I would sort of just say that I'm encouraged that, frankly, as a military person, that we did not have to apply military force. So I'm good on that sense. I asked a few of our folks about our own chemical systems, our own chemical. How long did it take for us? And I think we're pretty accountable in our own system. How long did it take for us to kind of, get rid of everything?
Right.
And, for those who've ever been out to Dugway Proving Ground, I have been out there in Oregon. It took us about 7 years. So it's going to take a while. So I'm hopeful that there's clear, cool-headed, very, very long view thinking, decision-making done, but I'm not confident that it's going to happen overnight.
Thank you, General. Thank you. Let me read some of the questions from our colleagues in the audience here. How does the administration's pivot to the Far East, and that's to rebalance East Asia, affect intelligence priorities? How will we plan for future changing collection needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, everybody asks that question because, you feel this sucking sound, in the central region of the world, Middle East, Central Asia, East Africa, and yet we want to have this, pivot, and the key word is toward the Pacific. So it will challenge us. And I will tell you that, and without getting into, really any classified information in here, but I will share with you that if you were to look at what the President has directed the United States intelligence community to do, and he does that fairly routinely, and where are the majority of those resources prioritized, I think that you would gain a better understanding of what the USIC has done to achieve that stated objective of the White House, of the President. I think we're actually in pretty good shape. We're not where we need to be, and we're still transitioning from Afghanistan. Right. And there will, with that will be some other decisions that are going to have to be made about allocation of resources. But I'm confident that we have the right set of resources right now. But more importantly, Joe, I think is important to bring out here is, and it's in our national security strategy and it's in our national military strategy, which are two light documents worth reading. It talks about partnerships. Mm-hmm. I just spent about a month or so ago with 29 nations in Jakarta, Indonesia, and all the nations, 29, so I was one of the 29, they were all my counterparts, so all the directors of military intelligence for 29 nations around the world, mostly in the Asia-Pacific theater, to solely focus on that theater. Now, what was interesting to me was countries from South America showed up for the first time. And partly why is an economic reason. If you ever get a chance to read Secretary Ash Carter's speech a few months back, he talks about this pivot is not about the military. He talks about it as an economic and a diplomatic adjustment as much as it is about military. 90% of the world's resources, 90% of the world's resources, for those that are looking at global trends, are projected to be passing through the Pacific by around the time frame around 2030. That's significant. Now, whether or not that's exactly precise, I don't know, but I know that it's moving in that direction already.
That's impressive. Thank you, sir. Another question from our colleagues. Could you speak to the level of integration between ISITE, Orion, and the Joint Information Environment, JIE?
Yeah, great. So first of all, Orion, and I think you had my Chief Technology Officer and Chief Innovation Officer. Chief Technology Officer is Gus Tavares, many of you know him. Chief Innovation Officer is George Dandoni. Dandoni, two just incredibly talented individuals who, I mean, talk about giving them a long rope, get out there and move this thing along. Orion. Orion is not a tool. Orion is not a database. Orion is DIA's, the Defense Intelligence Agency's, implementation strategy to implement the